nobody hotter. Thank you for tuning in with your girl Tasha. We handle business, we ain't about to gossip. Here to uplift ya, now it's time to boss up. Hey, hey, tune in, nah, you can't miss. Making sure that you get your daily wake up list. We yelling bam, good vibes, good energy. Bam, being authentically me. Shout out Little Mo and Trinity, that's mini me. Gotta keep it in the family. Hey, your girl Tasha, YGT, time to get it hype. Hey, this is what you need. Hey, go ahead, turn it up, this my jam. Being authentically me like bam. With your girl Tasha, hey, let's dance. Being authentically me like bam. Yeah, now it's time to get it. Time to get it. Wake up, time to handle business. Yeah, yeah, hey, now it's time to get it. Time to get it. Wake up, time to handle business. Yeah, we about to get it live with your girl Tasha. Hey, like bam, let's go.
Hey, 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 it is your girl Tasha, known to the world as the Tasha Carpenter, but everybody calls me your girl Tasha because when you hang with me, what? It is like you are hanging with your girl. And you know what my favorite word is? It is bam, because I'm always being authentically me. Guys, I want to say hello and happy Saturday to each and every one of you. I want to go ahead and remind you that this is a time that you want to share. You want to share and invite, because today I have a remarkable guest joining us today that's going to help out with things that affect people all over the United States. Okay, this is things that you need to know to impact your communities. So make sure, take the time right now, hit share, hit invite, and let me just go ahead and bring this wonderful guest aboard with us on the screen. Let me get her here, and click one button, and there we go. Hello, Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am so awesome, and I am just so glad to have you here with us today, this morning. I appreciate you. I tell you, this is our first time actually meeting virtually person to person, right? I'm gonna say person to person, but virtually person to person, our first time meeting. And I've heard some dynamic things about you.
Oh, I'm glad.
Now, I tell you what, I love that hair too. I see that natural thing going on right there. And I hear you had some roots that come from Kingston, Jamaica.
That's right. Always representing. I was born in Kingston. I grew up here, but I lived in Jamaica and was born in Jamaica. So I'm always repping Kingston as well.
Okay, so how long was it before you came over here, and what brought you to the United States, and what area did you actually grow up in?
Sure. So I was born in Kingston, lived there till I was 5 years old. And then my mom's whole side of the family was in Delaware. And so we moved to Delaware when I was young. Grew up in Delaware, and I moved to Maryland when I was in grad school at American University. So I ended up coming to this area for grad school, started getting involved locally on different issues with the Young Democrats, with the African American Democrats, and all kinds of groups. And I ended up just staying and building roots here in Silver Spring and Montgomery County.
Oh, okay. All right. So now you are definitely an advocate for the community. Where did that come from? Was it something another family member did, or what was the first thing that made you decide that, hey, this is part of my passion, I'm gonna have to do this?
Sure. I think some of it is in my DNA. My dad was always an advocate from being a student in Jamaica. He's always someone who's very politically engaged in Jamaican politics. So I think part of it was just, something that's just in your blood. But I've always been passionate, especially coming from a country that is a developing country and growing up in the United States where there is so much opportunity and wealth. Seeing the differences in opportunity was something that always kind of fueled my passion for advocating for people, for organizing, for making policy change. And so I've always been passionate about policies in particular to be a tool to help impact and change people's lives. Because whether you're involved or not, whether you're at the table or not, policy is happening all around you. We're seeing it so much in this crisis, and the decisions that are being made, and the elected officials that are representing us and making decisions that either help or harm us. It's happening all around us. So we can choose to be at the table and be part of it, or regardless of if we're at the table or not, it's going to impact us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got a couple of good mornings coming in. Miss Melissa Hackney, I think, what are you doing? Joining us from Georgia. And Tanya Felton, is that South Carolina coming in here? Guys, please share and invite as we get other people to come on. And remember also, I want you to participate. So if you have questions that you want to be answered, please put them in the chat as well, okay? And this goes for our people who are joining us and maybe joining us from YouTube as well. Make sure you participate. So let's get down and kind of talk about right now what I guess is like two hot topics, or well, actually one I think is not a hot topic as much as it should be because you don't hear too much about it anymore. And that actually involves Census 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, Census 2020. I don't think that a lot of people really understand the importance of the census. And it's been downplayed, especially with so much going on with the pandemic, the upcoming elections, all this other kind of stuff. It's kind of been put into the background.
Mm-hmm.
So it was important to bring it forward. So can you just shed some light about the census and why the census is so important?
Sure. So the census takes place every 10 years, and it is a count of every single person in the United States. Why it's so important is that the census count determines resources for our community. So in Maryland, $18 billion per year is at stake in the 2020 census. That's funds that we get from the federal government for our schools, for our roads, for our hospital. It's the school lunch program that a lot of kids rely on. It's Medicaid services, it's housing vouchers and support for people. So there's so many programs and so many dollars that are distributed, and it's based on the count. So you can imagine if we're a state of about 6 billion people, if we're missing hundreds of thousands of people in our count, that's a whole lot of money that's missing from our communities. So I always like to say the census is about money and power. And that's the money aspect in terms of having resources for things that we need. The power aspect of it is that we use the census count to also draw our district. So it determines who ends up representing you. The congressional districts, the state districts, like the district that I represent, they will likely change as a result of the 2020 census. We take those numbers and we draw the lines, which we'll do next year, based on the count of where people are. So you can imagine that if you're not visible and you're not counted, the political representation is literally happening without you. You're almost invisible when the lines are being drawn. And we know that we want to be present and visible when it comes to political decisions that are being made. So it's really money and power that are at stake when it comes to the 2020 census. And that's why everyone needs to be counted.
All righty. I actually had someone that, because I asked the questions, have you filed your census? And the response was census.
Oh gosh.
You know, as if people, they just they don't find it to be important. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to the communities that are underrepresented because of failing to participate in it, what do you think attributes to the lack of importance?
Right.
Or how that was taught? What do you think brought us down this road where people don't truly understand, maybe because they're not educated about it?
Right. I think there's a lot of mistrust in the government, and there's a history that we're well aware of in terms of that mistrust, and it's well warranted in a lot of ways. The census is basically saying we want a bit of your information. You know, how many people live in your household and things like that. And some people, for a number of reasons, might not want to share that kind of information. Ask you for your race. So for me, I got to put that I'm Black, and I got to also include my ethnicity and say and write in Jamaica as well, which is the first time that you can include that level of specificity on the census. But going back to your question, I think that mistrust in the federal government is definitely one of the reasons why people don't want to respond. However, the census has one of the tightest laws on the books when it comes to Title 13, where none of this information can be shared. Census Bureau officials actually can go to jail and get a hefty fine if any information is shared. And also, when you respond to the census, you become sort of, your information is sort of disassociated with you, and you become more of a sort of part of the statistics, the overall statistics, as opposed to Jheanelle Wilkins has this number of people in her household, Black Jamaican. It sort of becomes disassociated with you and part of the statistical information. So people can feel good in terms of privacy when it comes to the census, but our communities are undercounted. Black, people of color, children under 5 in particular are undercounted. People will fill out their census and they'll have children in their household and they won't include the children. So we also want to get the message out that children should be counted. Children are heavily undercounted. Renters are undercounted. So it's just so important for the reasons that I mentioned, that we do respond to the census because it is important and the data is private.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up about, even though, they have videos and things that tell us that this is private information, is not to be used against you. But I've heard numerous people, especially fathers who maybe are behind on child support, or when you're dealing with people who are immigrants and they believe that they can be deported or something as a result of this. This is the reason why they choose not to participate in it. Now, really, some people also have questions about the fact that, why do we count immigrants or illegal immigrants as a part of the census? Why would census workers or people go out and get those as part of the statistics?
Sure. So there has definitely been a concerted effort to create fear and mistrust around the census. The president tried to put the citizenship question on the census form, which would scare people, saying, "Are you a citizen?" which would scare people from wanting to respond. And the reason why there are these scare tactics is because this is actually something that is very important. And whenever there's something to help us build power, you'll always see these efforts to sort of push us away from participating. The reason why all people should count every single person is because the census is the constitutional effort. It is in our U.S. Constitution. It says a count of every single person, every single human being living in the United States. So whether you are a voter, whether you are an immigrant, undocumented immigrant, whatever your status is, you are a president of the United States, and we want to have that information. And one of the reasons why it's important for every single person to count is because the census goes into decision making. Whether you're documented or undocumented, you might be using that public transportation that we need to get the resources for. When we're making plans in our community and building schools, or trying to just plan ahead for what our communities are going to look like, people are present, whether you're documented or undocumented, you're present in the community, and we want to include you in those plans. When we're allocating resources, if people are missing from the census, there is no way to plan and make sure that we have enough resources that people are going to be consuming. So if we just remove certain people, then who are, part of our community, then we're missing a lot of the data. So that's why it's critical that every single person is counted.
Okay, so we had Tanya Felton put out that she actually was hired as a census taker, but haven't been called to start working. Tanya, I don't know how long ago that call took place, but do you find, Jheanelle, or do you know, are we experiencing the same type of thing when it comes to census workers, the shortage that we're right now, we're hearing because of the pandemic, there's a huge shortage right now, of course, of voting judges and stuff that are not willing to work the election. But the census workers, most of them are going door to door to people's houses and things of that nature. So can you speak to whether or not how we doing with the collection of the data if we have to go door knock because people are not completing the forms?
Sure, that's a great question. And something that's really important to keep in mind is that the census deadlines and census operations have been delayed because of COVID-19. What Tanya might be referring to is being hired as an enumerator, which is the people that go door to door and knock on the doors of those who have not responded. And so that was supposed to start taking place back in May. However, it's not until just now because of COVID-19. Obviously, back in May, going door to door to people's houses at that time, even now, is still a little risky, certainly, but it's particularly at that time of the pandemic. So they're just now starting that operation. So it's possible that you could still be called, Tanya, because the Census Bureau has delayed the different operations. So it's important for people to know that we're now in that period where someone may come to your door if you have not responded to the census and knock on your door and try to collect that information from you. You definitely want to do that in a safe way and follow all precautions. However, we do encourage people to either just go online to my2020census.gov and respond on your own so that no one comes to your door, or if someone does come to please provide that information to the Census Bureau.
Now tell me, we know she said exactly. Okay, exactly. now tell me, the pandemic, of course, and we're going to get into that a little bit more about the delaying of the census because of that. That has impacted a lot of things, but is there some other coalition behind the census and the pandemic too, that somehow that the census impacts the pandemic in some way or format?
That's a really good question. So another way that the census data is so important is that we, in Maryland, for example, the Black Caucus, a member of the Maryland Black Caucus, we fought really hard to get data around who is being impacted, racial data, right? Because at first, all we were seeing was the numbers that, okay, 50 people in Maryland have it, 100 people in Maryland have it, but we wanted to know by zip code, by race, so we can really have an understanding. And when you're seeing these numbers come out from the pandemic and COVID-19 with hospitalizations and number of people who've contracted, the rate of infection, that's coming from our count of people in the state, of people in the country. And that is based on Census Bureau data. So even in a crisis like right now, we are relying on that counts from the census, from the other surveys that the Census Bureau does to inform our rates of infection, our hospitalization. Like, that data is actually so critical right now. So we're seeing it at play. So again, when people are missing, if I want to look at my district, District 20 in Maryland I represent, I'm able to know how many people are in District 20, and also able to, cross-reference against how many people are getting infected, right? And the way that we're able to be informed is from this U.S. Census Bureau data. So again, when it comes to having this critical information, numbers are important. Knowing how many people we have, kind of where they are, is important in this crisis. And the last thing I'll mention around this is that we've been talking about, the vaccine, and there's been a rush to get a vaccine. How are we going to know how many vaccines we need and where people are if we don't have a count in our country? So again, those numbers just keep coming back into play in terms of having really good data.
So the number, when people talk about, of course, there's a lot of people who act like COVID-19 is not real, or they say that they're fudging the numbers and make people more scared than hearing from this, because we know that when it comes to the census, a lot of times, a lot of people are not counted. And another thing some people don't realize, and I mean, really is just because I think that reading more so as I paid attention to doing the census, I was actually, like what Tanya talked about, I was an enumerator during the last census. And that's when I realized that, this thing only happens every 10 years.
Exactly.
How do we get to that it's only every 10 years? And then another thing that I think people don't realize too, Jheanelle, is that, for instance, my daughter is in college right now. My daughter is not counted as a part of this community. She's being counted as a part of the community in Oklahoma.
Right.
Now she's a junior. She's going to graduate next year, but she's not part of the numbers for the next 10 years for where we live at. Now, I truly don't understand how that all came about.
Right.
Was it designed that way? Or, I mean, why? If it's something that's so important do you have an idea of why is it that it's only collected data over or every 10 years?
Right. So the Constitution just
Need
our
to be
founders
changed.
decided, right, they just decided every 10 years. So it's a snapshot. Plus, the Census Bureau does other surveys within the 10 years. So some people might be listening might have gotten mailings from the Census Bureau saying, hey, respond to these household questions. So there are sort of mini surveys that take place in between. And then the big, really important one is every 10 years. But group quarters are very interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned that. What we call colleges, homeless shelters, prisons, your senior homes, those get a little more complicated because you have people, in a building or someone, or maybe it's not their actual home, what they would call their home. And the Census Bureau has to figure out sort of a fair way to count everyone. So what they decided is that people who are away at college, count them in that community because it's a snapshot of where our country is in that moment. But it can get complicated when we're talking about these different quote unquote group quarters, where people are sort of living away from what they might consider their home.
Okay. So can you speak to historically what's considered as the undercounted communities?
Yes, sure. So low income communities, people of color, the Black community has been severely undercounted. I mentioned children under 5 are actually the highest undercounted group. And so we really need to get the word out to everyone to count their children, make sure that they're included. Renters tend to be undercounted as well. And so those are some of the major groups. And historically, these particular groups have been left out because not enough effort has been made to make sure that we all are aware of why this is important, why they should respond. And then also the government mistrust you can imagine with some of these communities as well. So right now what we're doing is, at least in Maryland, our response rate in terms of the people that got their form, and you can go online, is the first time in the history of the country that you can respond online, my2020census.gov. Our national response rate in the United States is 63.6%. So 63.6% of people in the country have been counted so far. In Maryland, where I represent, we're doing a little bit better with 67.9% of people who have responded so far. So that's why, since almost a little over 40% or under 40% of people haven't responded yet. Now that's why those enumerators are coming around, knocking on those doors, and we want to get everybody counted.
So living in this COVID world, can you compare? Do you happen to know this time 10 years ago when it comes to that 63%? What were we looking at? Are we significantly lower than where we're normally at, even though we're always low? But do you have a comparison about how it was?
We are definitely significantly lower as a nation. I can pull up the exact number, but we always compare to 2010. Where were we in 2010 and where are we now? So I can pull up what the exact number was, but the last time, I don't remember off the top of my head, but last time I looked, it was significantly lower in terms of where we are now. But of course, with COVID-19, there were a lot of plans to do in-person events. In 2010, I was part of the census effort as well to get people counted. We were having little block parties. We were having giveaways. We were doing all kinds of things to get out the count. Obviously, because of COVID-19, everything had to go online. So it's more social media that you're trying to reach people, grocery stores, things like that. So that the COVID-19 definitely made the outreach around the census more difficult. So on top of everything, we are definitely behind, but we have the opportunity to make sure that everyone's counted in the next couple of months.
So, guys, this is the reason why it's important to share and invite, what you just said. You know, you're not able to go out and have the in-person interactions with people. It's more than just the people that come around and knock on your door that we need to do this. I know that I think that a lot of my viewers are very intelligent viewers. So you've probably already done your census, but I guarantee you know somebody that hasn't done their census. So we need to share this and give them this information. Now, you know, I want to kind of flip over. I was watching an interview the other day, which I found to be kind of interesting, with why can't I think of her name? Abrams. What's her first name?
Stacey Abrams.
Stacey Abrams, and she was talking about the fact that right now, some people don't know, we had an extension on when the census could be in, but that time frame has been reduced by 30 days. So let me just play this little interview first, and then I want to come back to you and I want to talk to you a little bit about how your opinion of what's going on and what we need to do to try to get this changed. So we'll be right back with you guys. One moment.
You also have an organization focused on the census, and obviously the president has sort of waged this kind of war against the census, the famous citizenship question case in which they were defeated at the Supreme Court. This new executive action, and now they're cutting cutting the count short by a month. The census is another place where people can take some small action, which is, if you're watching this right now and you haven't filled out your census form, go fill out your census form at census.gov and get everyone you know to do it. But what are your concerns more broadly about where we are with this census?
We need Congress to take action. When the next COVID relief passes, we need the census to be extended to the end of October. We have to remember that the non-response follow-up period, when people come and knock on your doors, that is usually how the historically undercounted communities actually get included. That means it's absolutely necessary for communities of color. Right now, Latinos are lagging by 12%, African Americans are lagging by 14%, Native Americans are lagging by 25%. Even the Asian American population, which is doing the best of communities of color, is behind by 2%. If they cut off that period, they're not simply ending it early. They are going to then use a statistical tool called imputation to guess the race and needs of those communities. And when they guess, they tend to guess white. They tend to guess that the people who are not being included, that they look like the majority that actually performed. And that means that communities of color get erased, not simply for the census count, but that then means that racial gerrymandering would be permissible, because you can't prove that they were gerrymandering communities of color. Even though everyone in the neighborhood knows it, they have no ability to prove it. So this is even more nefarious than people realize. And we need, in addition to completing the census, we need folks to call on Congress to statutorily push the date to October 31st. Do not let them end the census early. Make them do their job so we have an accurate census and an accurate count of America.
All right. So with that being said, what's going on?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't have said it better. Stacey Abrams really took the words out of my mouth. Basically, what is taking place is that the Trump administration is working to sabotage the census and really skew it towards his community and leave out some of the historically undercounted communities that we've been talking about. So the basics of what he's trying to do is that non-response follow-up period, this is the time when the door knockers are coming around. This has started, right? We talked about that. They want to cut that short an entire month. When the door knockers come around, they're particularly coming around to the people who have not responded, which are, again, the low-income communities, the people of color, our Black residents, our renters, who really depend on a lot of the resources from the 2020 census count. So when you cut the door knocking short, when you cut that enumeration short, you literally are leaving out and missing a whole lot of people and probably the most vulnerable communities. So this is really an attempt to rush the census, an attempt for the Trump administration to just cut the census short and make sure that when it's time to to distribute the congressional seats, that it is done while Trump is still in office. So there's a lot of political things happening in the 2020 census to make sure that our communities, that historically undercounted communities and under-resourced communities are not counted. And again, that's why we know that the census is so important, because there's an entire effort to try to leave these communities out, and we cannot let that stand. So that's the gist of what is taking place. It's that we're being shortchanged. We are really being shortchanged by the Trump administration, and it's purposeful.
Tessie said, great information. Thanks, Tessie, from joining. Hi, everyone is saying hello. Okay, so you talked about that this with the census, if it gets done now, they could distribute the congressional seats and everything while he's still in office. Is that about for this term that it would be done, or is this something happening for whoever the term is, the next term for whoever is elected as president, or that's something that can be done this 2020?
That's something that can be done this 2020. The normal process of the census, but again, it was delayed because of COVID-19, is that in December, the Census Bureau says, all right, we did all this work. Here is a count of the United States. Here you go, Mr. President. Here are the numbers. And then the presidential administration then determines the congressional seats for every state. So in Maryland, we have 8 congressional seats. Not a whole lot. Other states have more, and so on and so forth. So what the Trump administration wants to do is, what should happen is that instead of sending this in December, we should push that back, because everything else has been pushed back, and the Census Bureau needs time to do their calculations. They go back and try to rerun their numbers, make sure there's no mistakes. Stacey Abrams talked about a little bit about some of the process of what takes place. So we want to make sure that we don't rush it, right? But what the Trump administration is trying to do is to rush it so that in December, Trump will still be in office. He will get the numbers and distribute the congressional seats and have that opportunity to do that. And so that is also something that is dangerous, because they're trying to basically engineer this situation to make sure that he is still in the presidency when it's distributed. So if it happened in March, we don't know if he'll be president, right? Let's say they decided to give the president the numbers in March. We don't know at this time, so we have an election. He may or may not be president at that time. So he wants it to happen in December, when he is still there. So hopefully that makes sense. But the gist of it is that there's a lot of engineering happening to try to control power, to control Congress and the congressional seats. And the main thing that we can all do to help make sure that he doesn't succeed is to make sure that our undercounted communities are counted, that we are visible, that we are there in the numbers, because it's all based on the numbers and who responds.
Okay, now is there anything as besides making sure that, like right now, if you haven't done your census, I give you permission to just click off of here and go to the website and just do your census. Okay, just knock it out. You can miss the next 10 minutes of Your Girl Tasha. Just get it done.
Right.
What is there anything that we can do with regards to, like what Stacey was talking about making sure that this 30 days is given back, the original extension date is back? What, as a regular person, is it that I can do, or someone else who's watching can do, to try to get those 30 days back that are so crucial?
So something that everyone can do is also contact their U.S. senators. In the next COVID-19 package for relief for states and communities, you remember a couple of months ago, there was a check that was sent, there was resources for states, there was all kinds of things that were in that package that Congress put forth. The Senate is considering a package right now, and there is census aspects that have been suggested as part of that package as well. It's money for the census so that there can be additional outreach, more mailers, and just necessary funding for census workers. And also, we want to make sure that the next COVID relief package includes this extension, includes these additional 30 days that are necessary. So you can contact your U.S. senators and say, please save the census and include the census extension in the next COVID-19 package. That's something that every single person can do to make sure that their senators are aware that we're paying attention. I don't know if folks are aware, but the Senate is in disarray right now trying to figure out this package, trying to get an agreement around what should be in the next COVID-19 relief package. And there's we want eviction assistance, we want unemployment help. There's a lot of things that we want in there. But another thing that people are not as aware of is that there's money for the census that's critical, that should be included, and the census extension. So make sure that you lift that up with your senators as well.
Okay, because I do not want to lose you as a resource, we're going to kind of mix things up, but I want to take a few minutes to go ahead and I took a little clip from the census government official video that kind of explains the census just a little bit and how long it takes. So we're going to go ahead and share that. And then we're going to move over. It's going to follow a commercial. And then we're going to move over and come and talk about some other hot topics like the election. That's coming up as well, too. So guys, hold on and we'll be back with you on the flip side.
The 2020 Census is a count of every person living in the United States. The census is required by the U.S. Constitution and takes place once every 10 years. The 2020 Census is very important. Your responses help to determine the number of seats each state has in Congress and guide how more than $675 billion in federal funding is spent in communities each year. The 2020 Census is easy. Completing these questions only takes about 10 minutes. You can respond online from a computer, tablet, or mobile phone 24 hours a day. You can also respond over the phone or using the paper questionnaire. If you respond, we may not need to send a Census Bureau interviewer to visit you. An interviewer may still visit if you respond late, if we have follow-up questions, or for other surveys. Your information is confidential. Federal law protects your responses. Your answers can only be used to produce statistics and cannot be used against you by any government agency or court.
All right, Rookie, what you got for me tonight?
Multiple cases of drunk, drug, distracted, and drowsy drivers picked up. Meet Andy Carmichael, age 25, drunk driver. Statement says he'd attended a friend's Halloween party after hours of drinking heavily. He left to get more drinks.
Book him.
Meet John Smith, aka Mr. Distracted. Statement reads, ran a stop sign, ran a red light, caused a crash.
Well, this guy needs to keep his head in the game.
Meet Jane Goodman.
Grandma?
Jane thought a few extra pills would be okay. She said she just wanted to sit pain-free before her daily dose of Jeopardy.
That ain't cool, Grandma. That ain't cool.
We have a suspect picked up for falling asleep at the wheel. Meet Charlie Knight, a.k.a. Drowsy the Clown. Statement reads...
Statement reads creepy as
After a hard day's work, Charlie was exhausted and chose to get behind the wheel.
I hate clowns.
All right, what do you think, Chief?
Don't be like these idiots. Drive like you give a
All right. So y'all heard it from Mr. Shaq. Drunk driving, that's a bad thing. He said, drive like you give a... Y'all heard him, okay? Welcome back, guys, to another week of Hanging with Your Girl, Tasha. And today we have a wonderful guest. And I think from the video that we already shared from the census, you could tell that a lot of the information that Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins has shared with us has been totally accurate. And again, 10 minutes. Take the 10 minutes. She knows what she's talking about, okay? Now, what I did want to do, let's see, we had good morning, Arthur Lynette Jewel calling in, coming in from North Carolina. How you doing, sweetie pie? Did you fill out your census, lady? I know you be so busy. I gotta keep up with you. You're talking about the COVID-19 packages and how we do all this stuff where we attach things to these packages to get them passed and things of that nature, and also how Trump has taken away the 30 days from the census. Well, there's other things that's going on that Mr. Trump is doing because, of course, both sides try to put things on these packages. And he says that if Democrats give a little bit of concessions, then maybe they could get some other things going on, particularly like funding for the United States Postal Service with regards to this election that we have going on right now. All right, good. She said, done and finished, done and finished. All right. My daughter, I actually got a call from her, and she's in Oklahoma. And she was like, Ma, they're acting like a mail-in ballot is not going to happen because the president, something she saw on Twitter, the president is not willing to fund and give the extra money for the post office to handle properly delivering the ballots. Okay. And she really has a concern about this. So I watched a video where he talked about, well, you know, if you give some concessions, then maybe I'll give this money. But he also alluded to the fact that one of the reasons why he does not want to support giving money to it is he feels that mail-in ballots is just going to give more increases of the chances of voter fraud to take place. So what can you, if anything, you could share about the mail-in ballot process, whether or not that does increase fraud? How is it going to impact us? Should people mail their ballots in, take their ballots to the Board of Elections in their states, go to, I mean, here in this area, of course, you could come to the voting centers and they have the secured mailboxes outside where you could drop your ballots at versus putting it in the regular mailbox. I mean, it's so much going on. What can you say about it?
Absolutely. So I know that probably a lot of people listening feel like me, where Trump does the craziest things every day, and sometimes we can get desensitized by it. But this is absolutely shocking and insane, where we have the president of the United States who is literally admitting to working to undermine our ability to vote. People are using vote by mail, and the president is trying to kill the Postal Service. He is literally stealing the election, or trying to steal the election as we speak. It is a crazy and scary situation. And I really hope that in the next administration that Trump is brought to justice for his crimes against our country. So I have to say that and get that out, because it is just appalling. But where we are is that, yes, vote by mail has been used very successfully in states. I can say in Maryland, we saw an increase in our turnout, where we had a primarily mail-in election in June for our primary. And so we actually mailed out ballots to every single registered voter, proactively mailed it out, and people responded in a really good way. And we just saw our numbers increase, which was great. We had no signs of voter fraud at all. And as a nation, the idea of vote by mail being wrought with fraud is absolutely false. And it's a narrative that is usually pushed by people who don't want to see, voting become easier, and don't want to see the voting in numbers that takes place when we make it easier with things like vote by mail. So what I would recommend for everyone is that make your plan to vote and put your plan in motion ASAP. So if vote by mail is your method of choice, which I still recommend, because the voting lines are going to be really, really long. You obviously have a risk right now of going to any in-person anywhere because of COVID-19. So vote by mail is still the safest way to vote, but request your ballot now. If you're in a different state other than Maryland, you have to look up the specific information. But in Maryland, you can request your mail-in ballot right now. And I would recommend, as part of making your plan, understanding and figuring out how are you going to return that ballot. I will say, for me personally, because of what Trump is doing, I'm not really going to put my faith in putting my ballot in the mail. If I receive it, I'm not going to put my faith in putting it back through the mail, because literally our president just said that he's trying to make sure that those ballots don't get back in time. So I would look up whether you have a drop box. In Maryland, we'll have drop boxes I understand all throughout the state. So that's a place where you can drop off your ballot. In your state, you might have to drop it off at your Board of Elections by a certain date. You can go vote in person if you would like to. If you have a vote early option, I would go early so that you avoid the lines on election day. But the long and short of it is that everyone needs to have their plan in place. This is not the election to wait until election day and say, oh, let me show up. This is not the election to do that.
Well, voting in person is even something to be concerned about, only because of, again, COVID-19 and the number of judges. I mean, I'm a chief election judge, and this was the first time in my life that I've ever had 7 people decided they wasn't coming in like the night before because of their worries about COVID. So when they talk about the number of people and, with Governor Hogan wanting to open up every location, they're so short. I mean, I've never got so many calls from the Board of Election like, are you still a yes? Have you changed your mind yet? You still want to do this? Are you sure? So, I mean, even with that, I'm very concerned about it. Now Author Lynette Jewell is coming on here late, of course, and she was asking, are you a delegate for Charles or PG County? So neither. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about where you are a delegate and also what your roles are in your role as delegate.
Sure, yes. So I represent District 20 in Montgomery County. I'm actually the first Black woman to represent my district. And as of 2018 in Montgomery County, I'm part of a group of 3 Black women that are actually the first Black women ever elected to represent Montgomery County in the state legislature. So that's something that has been amazing, and to do something and represent a group and be at the table speaking up for these issues, which hasn't been done before in Montgomery County. So again, the Maryland General Assembly is a policy-making body of the state. We set the laws, and there are 141 of us in the Maryland House. I serve in a leadership position in the House as the House parliamentarian, basically trying to keep my colleagues in line, make sure we're following our rules, and that we are orderly conducting the business of the state. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, which takes the lead in the House when it comes to education issues, voting issues and election law, gambling in the state, and also taxes. So when a bill with one of those topics is introduced, it first comes to our committee for us to consider it and decide if it's going to move forward. Just to give you a sense of where my district is for a little bit more background, it's outside of Washington, D.C. So it's Silver Spring, it's Tacoma Park, and it's the White Oak area. And it's a very diverse community, and very proud and grateful to be able to represent in the legislature.
Well, she said to you, I don't know if you saw it pop on the screen, she's like, congratulations. And she also says she is definitely voting early too. Yeah. So, okay. What are you hearing? That I imagine, do you get a lot of calls from people with us dealing with the school systems and people having to get ready to take their children back to school, and teachers and what they're going to do, or concerns about if they're going to the virtual learning model and how it's going to cause the kids to fall behind, or what do parents do that have full-time jobs and they have elementary school kids, and either I'm going to work and not have a job and not be able to feed my children, or my child's going to be left behind. I mean, are you hearing things about that from your constituents in the office, and what resources could be available to them?
Yes, absolutely. I'm hearing a lot from constituents when it comes to just virtual learning, when it comes to childcare. I think one of the things that we've seen with COVID-19 is just how interdependent so many of our systems are. Growing up, my mom is a childcare provider. And so I really intimately understand the issues of childcare from a provider perspective as well. And providers right now in Maryland, to even get people going back to work, we need childcare services. And so right now, a lot of the childcare providers are saying, we're closing down because of COVID-19. We've lost a business and we just are not able to operate. They need support from the state. And so we've been advocating with Governor Hogan to help save our childcare centers and our childcare providers. So if we don't have the childcare together, and as you said, it's difficult for people then to be able to go back to work as well. And then we have the issue of the schools that are going to be virtual. In Maryland, jurisdictions get to decide whether they're going to be virtual or not. So where I represent in Montgomery County, at least for the fall, our schools are going to be virtual. And so I am hearing from parents who don't have the opportunity. It's a privilege, certainly, to be able to work from home. And many parents don't have that type of privilege. So what we're doing is working with the county to figure out childcare options, one. Also, we are really advocating around the gap in learning, because in a place that has such income inequality like Montgomery County, where I represent, and lots of places across the country, we're seeing where the wealthy parents, their private schools are opening some of them, and their kids are going back to school, or those wealthier parents are also able to hire a teacher out of the county system to come and provide that private tutoring. Whereas some of our other students don't even have the computer or don't have the high-speed internet, and certainly don't have the resources to have a private tutor. So we're advocating around equity as well, in terms of making sure that the students who are already behind, that they're provided with resources and support, whether it's in small group settings, and that MCPS and the state, our county system in the state, work together to provide that extra support. So it is very, very challenging. But we're working to figure out some solutions, because our students are only going to fall further and further behind the ones that don't have the type of resources to get that type of level of support.
Okay. Now I have some people don't always read. So at the bottom of the screen, do you want to just let people know how they can follow you and stay in touch with you and what you have going on?
Absolutely. So I am on Twitter the most. So please follow me on Twitter. It's at Jheanelle W, my first name and W. And then also on Facebook, facebook.com/Jheanelle Wilkins. I'm always providing updates, whether it's on the election, on the census, unemployment issues. Of housing is one of my passions, especially when it comes to renter issues and making sure that people stay in their homes. So I've helped to lead the Maryland House of Delegates in advocating for funding to help people pay down on their housing debt as a result of COVID-19. People haven't been able to work. So I give a lot of updates on that and those issues as well. So please follow me, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation there.
Well, there's a lot of things going on right now with a number of people that are about to be evicted too.
Yes, it's an issue. And we've been calling it out since the beginning of the crisis. We've been calling it out that back in March, with businesses shutting down, we knew that there was going to be an eviction crisis. And now we're at this place in Maryland where 40% of renters are behind on their rent. And the courts have now started opening up. So that means that evictions are going to start to begin. And it's even more dangerous now because of COVID-19, when we're still asking people to be careful and stay in as much as possible. But now there's an opportunity for people to be evicted. So it's a really challenging time.
And you spoke of the unemployment, cutting off the benefits with that too. I mean, all of it. This is just some crazy times, Jheanelle.
It is. And just the number of topics that we've talked about in this session, it's a lot going on. But my advice always for people out there who want to be an advocate, we're talking about impacting your community. Don't get overwhelmed. Pick your one issue. Maybe you decide that making sure that people vote is going to be your one thing over the next few months. Pick that, focus on that, learn everything you can about that, and get out the information and do what you can on that issue. I think that it can be so overwhelming with everything going on, but perhaps you just pick and focus in on that one thing and do as much as you can.
Yes, Ms. Larnice Fletcher says it is so sad. We have a question coming from Arthur Jewel asking, do you also handle squatters?
Squatters meaning, so when I think of squatters, I think of that as people who do not have a lease. I mainly focus in on people who are formal, renters in terms of having a lease, in terms of, being formally housed. So I don't focus as much as on the people who would be considered squatters if we're sharing the same definition of a squatter. So not as much is what I would say in terms of the squatter issue, but that's also a legal issue. I'm not as in the weeds on squatters and evictions when it comes to people who are squatting, but that's also, I believe, a legal effort in terms of removing a squatter and things like that.
Okay, thank you. So another thing that has been scrolling at the screen, guys, that I want to point out because we're about to wrap up here is the general election. Again, is November the 3rd, 2020. 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. and early voting is Thursday, October 22nd, 2020 through Thursday, October 29th, 2020, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. here in the Maryland area. If you're in a different state, make sure that you go to your local election board to find out the information pertaining to your particular area. I do want to let you know that we are here every Saturday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. as we have different featured guests. We're going to be moving out of politics for a little bit for next weekend, and just want to let you guys know that we are going to have one of our local dynamic saxophone players and instructors in the area, Mr. Stephen Garrison, will be here with us next Saturday, 11 a.m., and he will be performing live during the interview, so you definitely want to come back for that. If you're looking for the opportunity to hang with your girl Tasha, you can give me a call on 240-545-5695 for your booking information in order to be a featured guest. And again, as you guys know, your girl Tasha is not a one-trick pony. We touch base on everything, looking for community leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, entertainers, whatever tickles your fancy. If you think that you would like to be in front of this platform, and if you're positive, you could come and hang with your girl Tasha. So with that being said, at this point, I just want to give you the floor because we did touch on a whole bunch of topics. But if you would want to recap anything that's very important or just say something to the viewers, this is the moment. Tell them what you have. I'm going to give you front and center.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Tasha, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed having the chance to chat with you and your really engaged audience. The takeaway that I would like to leave for everyone is take these actions regarding the census, responding to your census, and voting. However, bring other people along with you. That's what's really needed. Reach out to others and share one or two things you learned today about why the census is important, and ask your friends and family to respond. Work it into the conversations that you're already having with people. Hey, did you fill out your census? And also with voting, make your plan and ask other people, share the information. I personally will be voting by mail, but I will hand deliver my ballot to a drop box or to my board of elections. Whatever you are doing, just make your plan and encourage others to make sure they vote and start working on their plan to vote right now. So I'll leave you with those action items, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
And we got a whole nother action item I think is important too. Everybody that knows the elderly person, pick up their ballots around your community and make sure they get to the right place. We definitely have got to help our elderly people and our people who are in nursing homes and things of that nature too, so we can make sure that we turn out the vote for 2020.
Absolutely. Let's get it done.
I appreciate you here, guys. So with that being said, we're going to say bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.